AB de Villiers was the best batter in T20 for a very long time. He was most probably the best batter in all formats for a while as well. He had the ability to block out a draw for days or sweep Dale Steyn from wide outside off stump for 6. He seemed to have picked up every skill that any batter had ever had and merged them all together. Glenn Maxwell is something kind of different. He hasn't taken all the lessons of cricket and perfected them. He's like an avant-garde batter. He's midway through a jazz solo only he can hear. Jos Buttler is something else again. His batting style looks more like a pro golf swing, and he was perhaps the first batter to master all the different versions of the scoops. But I suppose if you think about them all together, they are our T20 freaks. And the best way to show what I mean is to use Michael Wagner's method to show the different types of batters in T20. Strike rotators, boundary hitters, slow coaches, and players who can hit boundaries and rotate the strike. The players divide pretty nicely. Down here is your West Indian openers who hit boundaries and face a lot of dots. Up here are your master strike rotators who never face many balls in a row or find a way to hit that many boundaries. And at the apex of this is AB de Villiers. This is what he has been able to do better than anyone else in T20. And the only player really close to him is Glenn Maxwell. But if you're looking for other players like them, perhaps the best way of looking at it is to look for players who hit a boundary every 5.5 balls and have a dot ball percentage of under 35%. If that's the case, 2 other cricketers join them. The criminally underrated Riley Rousseau and Jos Buttler. Buttler and Rousseau have both opened a fair bit, which means that their dot ball percentage is remarkable, being that so much of their work is done with 7 fielders up. Rousseau has managed to do this at just below the top levels of T20 cricket. Buttler has done it at the very top. All of these 4 are slightly different with what they do, but perhaps as batting types, they're a little bit more similar. They combine batting and hitting with improvisation, meaning that they almost never stay still. Hitters get bogged down in dot balls, batters sometimes struggle to get fast strike rates, and you can set a field for someone who is just improvising all the time. What do you do when someone can do all 3? In the space of 3 balls, they can steal a 2, flip you over short fine leg, and stand in the crease and clear a grandstand. Buttler's journey is fascinating, because on his way to becoming arguably the world's best T20 batter, he actually recommitted to Test cricket. And remember, at that time, England had one of the best wicketkeeper batters in the Test world, Johnny Bairstow. But they were so obsessed with what Jos Buttler might be able to do, they brought him in as a specialist number 7 batter. I could only find 2 others in the previous 10 years. And they eventually, through a bit of a calamity of errors, ended up with Buttler keeping. But 2 things happened with Buttler as a Test keeper. He ended up with England's 3rd highest average when he came back. By this point, Bairstow had been ruined almost entirely, and no other England top order player could actually score. So Buttler's 34 average is low and high at the same time. But the reason Buttler was brought back was because of how good he was in white ball cricket. And the idea was that despite the fact he'd never made consistent runs in the red ball game, he would be able to do seemingly what no other player ever has and take white ball only form into the Test arena and be better. He probably hasn't, but he's also not been terrible. But there have been some magic moments where his ability to see the game differently and also his ability to change who he is as a player from innings to innings have come in incredibly handy. There was a Test series in Sri Lanka in 2018 where Buttler made a 30-odd in the first Test, 63 in the second, and 64 in the fourth Test. In the first Test, he stayed in his crease and he didn't really sweep that much. In the second Test, he swept 31 times. In the last Test, he came out of his crease almost every single delivery and barely swept at all. Most players can either sweep or not sweep. Most players can either use their feet or not use their feet. Cricketers find a method for facing different kinds of bowling and they usually stick to it. Jos Buttler can just change whatever he does from innings to innings. But Jos Buttler is not a normal player. Since the start of 2015, there are 3 players whose strike rates are just not like other people in ODI cricket. First on this list is Glenn Maxwell. The next highest is AB de Villiers, and languishing with a strike rate of only 119 is Buttler. You can see how far removed they are from the next tier. It's here that they really distance themselves from other white ball batters and most T20 hitters. To score at this level with these averages, you need such a mixture of skills, and Buttler might have the most variety of the 3. And part of that is just because he can open. This is all the major openers since 2010 in T20 cricket. Obviously Chris Gayle is up there, but Buttler averages more when opening than Gayle does, and strikes at the same rate. He's like a combination of KL, Rahul, and Gayle. But he's also in the top 10 when it comes to batting at number 3 and number 4. Basically, he's just on the back end of a group who is just completely dominant in these positions. And he has been a star when he's batted down the order as well, although a lot of that was earlier in his career. He's quite often not even around by the time it gets to the death these days because he's attacked so hard early on. But when he does get there, like he did against Sri Lanka, he made 35 from 15 balls. But it's through opening where I think he's quite important, because T20 openers face such a large percentage of balls in each game. An opener in the last 5 years averages nearly 20 balls a match. Batting at number 5 is just over 13. So openers face 32% more deliveries per game than a number 5. So by Buttler being able to move up the order, his team actually gets more out of him. But there's also the fact that Buttler can just move down the order, whether it be in the Big Bash, 100, IPL, or for England. If he finds himself in a position where the team has other openers, he can simply move to one of the other positions and you're still getting one of the best players in the game. And it's also worth looking at where he scores fast. This is his scoring area strike rates compared to all players in T20 cricket. You can see that he is faster in 7 out of 8 quadrants than an average player. He's actually way quicker when it comes to fine leg and mid-on. That's for his scoops and flat bat hits. England batters in white ball cricket have not really been innovators. Perhaps only Mel Loy, who built a short career on sweeping fast bowlers, has ever been a real innovator with the bat. Buttler wasn't the first scooper. Doug Marillier, Tilakaratne Dilshan and Ryan Campbell were all ahead of him. But Buttler seemed to be better than any of them, partly because he was able to ramp, scoop or paddle all 3 of those shots in more directions. And that was what first attracted people to him. But then he added a power game. He's not really a big man. For instance, Sky made him do a hitting competition with Flintoff, who is just way bigger. And not only did Buttler win, but it was clear that they hit the ball in a different way. You can see from side on that they look fairly similar. But from this angle, you can see that Flintoff goes back and straight and hits through the line in a traditional manner. Buttler uses his wrist more and swings across the ball. The England players talk about the power fade he gets on the ball, which is a golf term. And there's a lot of science to what Buttler does as a hitter as well. This is from an ECB video where they have been using launch speeds and angles to get more power into their shots. So that means he can manipulate the field and stand and deliver. But he's also one of the fastest runners between the wickets in the world. Part of that is because sometimes he gets a head start. He's been man-catted twice looking for an advantage at the non-striker's end. But that just means he has even more versatility to his game than others. As you would expect with an English cricketer, he's better against pace than he is against the turning ball. In fact, he's 22% better against pace than an average batter. But he's also still 13% better against spinners than a standard T20 player. Part of that might be that he started playing at Somerset, which of all the grounds in England is probably going to help you the most with spin. There's a reason they call Taunton Hyderabad. So even when he's not as good against something, he's still a massive plus. But if you break Buttler down against different kinds of bowlers, you can see that he's not at his best against leg spin. But of course, he's still above average against it. And you can see from the other bowling types, he's very dominant against all the other major food groups. When Buttler destroyed Sri Lanka, the calls came in again that he was the world's best T20 batter. People have said this before. AB de Villiers is still around, and in the first part of the IPL, he looked incredible. Whether Buttler is better than de Villiers right now is very subjective. You could argue that Babar Azam and Virat Kohli might be better at handling good bowlers and rotating the strike. Not to mention that Andre Russell and Kieron Pollard are better boundary hitters. And de Villiers might still have a higher peak, and Maxwell might be the better player of spin. However, Buttler is just in a lot of these conversations right now. And that's because he is the most versatile T20 batter, who can run, hit, scoop, open, close, and be in the middle against spin or pace. You might have your own idea who's the best depending on what you like, but it's hard to argue that Buttler is not a freak. And he might also be close to the most complete freak.